Your liver, very important organ, because cancer cannot get a hold on the body if your liver's working well. There's an old proverb, it's found in Proverbs 14 verse 6. It says, knowledge is easy to him that understands. So what I want to do tonight is I want to give you an understanding of your liver, because when you have an understanding of your liver, you actually then have the knowledge on how to treat it. Everything that comes into your body comes first to the liver, and the liver basically determines where everything goes. And everything that comes out of your body comes out under the jurisdiction of the liver. And so I'm going to begin with showing you, which I already have touched on, is what happens with everything that comes into the liver. Now, any environmental poisons that come into the liver assesses it, and if it's really toxic, it wraps it up in fat and stores it. But if it can, it'll break it down to a water-soluble state and release it. What we also looked at in our last lecture is what happens with the food. All of this food breaks down to glucose in the gastrointestinal tract, and then it goes into the blood on the M1 straight to the liver. So here's our liver. And then the liver determines where it goes. The liver is the largest internal organ in the body. Your liver is the only organ that has the ability to regenerate, and you'll see why God made it that so as we go through this lecture. Your liver is called the project manager because everything that goes into the body goes first to the liver. It determines what happens. And so as I showed you in the last lecture, all of this food breaks down to glucose. The glucose goes into the blood and it goes straight to the liver. It's called the portal vein. I call it the M1, straight to the liver. And then the liver determines, first of all, it goes to the cell. So I'll take you through this once more. The glucose goes into the cell. It goes through a 20-step pathway, which gives us 2 units of energy. End result of the 20-step pathway is a chemical form of glucose called pyruvate. Pyruvate, as the chemical form of glucose, gets fed into the powerhouse, called the powerhouse because this 8-step pathway gives us 36 units of energy. And as I showed you, this is the oxygen pathway. Oxygen is what causes so much energy. This has no oxygen, so it's also called the anaerobic pathway. We also looked at how the excess glucose gets stored as glycogen, little bunches of grapes. We also looked at how the excess after that of glucose is stored as fat. Your muscle cell stores this glycogen, the quick release glucose store, and it can only be used by your muscle cell. But your liver can also store glycogen. And the glycogen that your liver stores, it can go all over the body, whereas the glycogen in your muscle cell can only be used by your muscle cell. There's a book called Good Calories, Bad Calories by Gary Torbs. You might have heard of it. It's quite a famous book. And he shows that back in the 1850s, there was a man called William Banting who was putting on weight. And he went to a very famous doctor called Claude Bernard, a French doctor, and he took him off all starches. It was called starches then. We call it carbohydrates now. So what did he eat? He ate a lot of fibre, a lot of vegetables. He ate a lot of meat, butter, cream, cheese, eggs. There was his protein. And meat, butter, cream, cheese, eggs also has a lot of fat. That was the diet that he was given by Dr. Claude Bernard. The weight just fell off him. Can you see why? You see, when you're not giving your body this quick release glucose stores, your liver can convert protein and fat to glucose, and your liver can turn your fat stores into glucose. And as I said the other lecture, that's called gluconeogenesis, creating new glucose out of the fat stores. So William Banting was not hungry because he was getting lots of energy from that being broken down and these. The weight was just falling off him because his liver was breaking down his fat stores because he wasn't delivering the quick release glucose. He was never hungry because, as you'll see tomorrow night, these are the 3 food groups that keep the food in the stomach longer. Has he found the perfect diet? Never hungry, weight falling off, lots of energy. So William Banting wrote a paper on it, and it was called The Bant. And this paper, we'd say today it went viral, but it actually went everywhere. This is the 1850s. And it was said, if you were on a diet, people would say, "Are you doing the Bant?" Let's fast forward to the 80s. What diet does that sound like? Dr. Robert Atkins' diet? Do you know that his book was #1 on the New York Times best-selling list 4 years running? Nutritionists and doctors hated him. Ansel Keys, who came up with the fat and cholesterol cause heart disease, they hated him. But the fact was, the people loved him. Why? Because what are we interested in? Something that works. This worked. And Atkins' patients weren't dying of heart attacks. Atkins scratched his head because his patients, the cancer patients, were going into remission. Remember we looked at yesterday how fungus and cancer are closely related, and fungus loves high glucose. Now his patients were on a diet that released slow, low glucose, so the cancer cells couldn't survive. His patients with high cholesterol levels came back to normal. Did you hear that? What are they eating? Meat, butter, cream, cheese, eggs? No wonder the nutritionists and the doctors hated him, because he proved them all wrong. And I would be a fool not to acknowledge what that diet did. Now, before you run out of the door, hear me out, because I'm a vegetarian. And what was Atkins? High meat diet. Do you know he had the science? And as Dr. Carl Benjamin said to me, he said, I used to be one of Atkins' patients, and if Atkins had read the China study, he said, I believe Atkins would have become a vegetarian. So we're looking at his science here, and his science was correct. His diabetics were coming off their medication. This is type 1 and type 2 diabetes, and my last lecture showed you why that is so. And that's why Atkins wrote his books. And he discovered that these 3 food groups are the 3 essential food groups. Do you know what essential means? Body cannot make it, you've got to put it in. Fibre is essential because your gastrointestinal tract, as you'll see tomorrow night, it needs to be swept every day. And the vegetables sweep that. Most people don't realise on the Atkins diet you had to eat 3 cups of vegetables a day. 1 cup had to be greens. Protein's essential because 50% of the membrane around every cell in the body is protein, and 50% of the membrane around every cell in the body is fat. That's pretty essential, except for the brain cell. Those cells are 70% fat, the membrane around them. The fattiest organ in the body is the brain. Wow. The 3 essential food groups. How many Aussies on the high carbohydrate diet are missing out on the 3 essentials? Now, carbohydrates aren't bad. What a relief. We like them. My husband would never forgive me if the potatoes stopped. Carbohydrates are only bad if you overdo them and they're refined. Can you see that? That's where the problem arises. What Atkins found was that the non-essential food group is actually carbohydrates. Do you know what that means? You can live well without them, but let me very quickly say, I don't suggest you do. There is no need. You see, your carbohydrate part of the meal is your negotiating part of the meal, and the negotiations change depending on your weight, your size, your height. My 6'6" brother-in-law eats more carbs than I do. But probably where the negotiations change the most is your health status. So if someone wanted to quickly conquer diabetes, as I just showed you, what would they drastically drop? Carbs. Someone wanted to lose weight quickly, what would they drastically drop? Carbs. Someone wanted to conquer cancer. What would they drastically drop? Carbs. And because it's a non-essential, you can actually live without it. It was in late 2016, Catalyst did a show called Fat or Fiction. I don't know if anyone here saw it. Very interesting. There was a professor of nutrition on there. He said you can actually live very well without 1 dot of carbohydrate. But as I said, it's not a bad food and it's not a wrong food. It's just that most people today overdo the carbs. Yes, it's got nutrients. Yes, we run on carbs. But can you see my point? Most people overdo it. So how do you do it on a vegetarian diet? Let me show you. Here is the food. We're going to look at the food part of the meal. We're going to look at the protein part of the meal and the carbohydrate part of the food, carbs. And we're going to go to Genesis 1:29 and we're going to look at what God tells Adam and Eve to eat. And God said, "Behold, I've given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of the earth." So what's a seed? A seed is a grain. A seed is a legume. A seed is a seed. So what are the grains? We've got wheat, rye, barley, oats, amaranth, buckwheat, quinoa, rice, Richard rice, so many. And they are high in protein and high in carbohydrate. So how many on our carbohydrate list are from grain? So grain, 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 grain. The majority on our high carbohydrate list are from grain. What's a legume? That's lentils, chickpeas, lima beans, black-eyed beans, cannellini beans, kidney beans, so many beans. They are high in protein and they are medium to low in carbohydrate. The fact is they are about 1/3 the carbohydrate that you will find in the grain. Seed, pumpkin seed, sesame seed, sunflower seed, chia seed, flax seed or linseed, high in protein, low in carbohydrate. So God said, "Behold, I've given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree in the which of the tree is a fruit-bearing seed." What's a fruit-bearing seed? That's your nut. All your nuts come from the fruit of the tree. Nuts are high in protein, low in carbohydrate. So we've got pecan and walnut and hazelnut, Brazil, almond, cashew, so many nuts, macadamia. To ensure you're getting your 3 essentials, my suggestion is you increase the legume, nut, seed part of the meal and to decrease the grain. Again, when my grandsons come, my 3 little grandsons are coming to stay at Grandma's house next week for the holidays. They'll eat 3 times the grade I do. They're growing boys. They want cereal. I cook them millet or oats for porridge every morning. Can you see that it changes? I don't need much. I'm just a little lady. How do you know when you're getting the right amount of carbs? Who will tell you? Your body will tell you. How will it tell you? You'll be the right weight. You'll have lots of energy. You sleep well. There's your sign. What's the old Aussie saying? If you're on a good thing, stick to it. What does the Bible say in 1 Thessalonians 5:21? Prove all things and hold fast to that which is good. In other words, if it works, do it. That's why I do it. It works. But most people stop the fat because of cholesterol. And this is a good time to look at cholesterol because your liver makes cholesterol. And it makes cholesterol according to the demands that the body puts on it. And 80% of the cholesterol that your liver makes is made from glucose. And 20% of the cholesterol that your liver makes is made from fat. Now this illustration alone shows you it's not the butter on the bread, it's the bread under the butter that's the problem, it's not the fat. Yes, there's a lot of problems with butter today because of the cows that it came from. I put olive oil on my bread. My husband puts avocado on his bread. In fact, most of the time I put both on my bread. Because remember, fat doesn't make you fat. So let me show you the two different types of cholesterol. You've got HDL, which is high density lipoprotein, and you've got LDL, low density lipoprotein. HDL's role in the body is that of a carrier. It carries excess cholesterol out of the blood and back to the liver. That's why it's called the good guy. LDL is the repairer and the rebuilder. Unfortunately, it's called the bad guy. But what you've got to remember is the body doesn't make anything bad. It has a role in the body. It has another role, and it delivers cholesterol to the brain. And your brain loves cholesterol. So let's have a look at how these two work in the body, particularly in the blood. So here's your artery, and because of its high density, HDL's in the middle, and because of its low density, LDL is on the edge. There's an interesting book that I read recently. It was only written about a year ago. It's called Put Your Heart in Your Mouth by Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride. She's well known for her gut and psychology book. She spends about 3 chapters showing that the cause of heart disease is damage to the arterial wall. So what damages the arterial wall? They're the endothelium cells. Cigarettes, there's 4,000 chemicals in a cigarette, and those chemicals damage the walls of the artery. The chemicals in our food, in our cleaning products, in our shampoos, in our conditioners, in our moisturisers, they're damaging the arterial wall. Mercury damages the arterial wall. It's found in fish, it's found in the flu vaccine, and it's found in the mercury fillings in our mouth. Mold is toxic. Mold gets into your blood, it can cause holes in the arterial walls. A high wheat, high sugar diet creating a lot of glucose, that sticky glucose connects with protein molecules and sticks to the wall of the arteries, so the high carb diet can do it. Alcohol and high sugar just feed it. Who's going to plug up the holes, students? The repairer and the rebuilder. The repairer and the rebuilder comes along and plugs up the holes. Now the person doesn't realise that the mouldy house is killing them. They don't really believe what it says on the packet of the cigarettes. They don't realise that the chemicals that they're cleaning their bathrooms with, that are in their food, and so what's happening is the damage continues. They don't realise that the mercury fillings in their mouth are damaging the walls. So what's happening in the arteries? What's it called? Atherosclerosis. To blame cholesterol for heart disease is like blaming the fire trucks for the fire. Well, they must cause the fire, they're always there. It's like blaming the ambulances for the accidents. Well, they must be causing them, they're the one common denominator at every accident. Can you see that theory? Let me tell you the books that we have at our health retreat. One book is called The Great Cholesterol Deception by Dr. Peter Dingle. Another book is called The Great Cholesterol Con by Dr. Malcolm Kendrick. Another book, which is an e-book, is The Great Cholesterol Lie by Dr. Dwight Lundell. He's a cardiovascular surgeon. He's performed 10,000 bypasses, and he's written a book, The Great Cholesterol Lie. The Great Cholesterol Myth by Johnny Bowden. We've got another one called The Great Cholesterol Hoax, 101 Lies. We're running out of words. Dr. Malcolm Kendrick, in his book, The Great Cholesterol Con, he says there is no proof. We've been deceived. So when they increase the cholesterol-lowering medication, which so many are on, sadly, what does that do? Well, what it does is it blocks the pathway in the liver that the liver uses to make cholesterol, but it's the same pathway that the liver uses to make coenzyme Q10. What's coenzyme Q10? It's your heart protective enzyme. So someone can go on cholesterol-lowering medication to to reduce their heart disease and increase their risk. Surely that's reducing heart disease, has it? No. Something else is happening. Are you ready for the side effects of cholesterol-lowering medication? Dementia, Alzheimer's, memory loss, muscle wasting, and they've just added another one, breast cancer, because your sex hormones are made from cholesterol. So if you're on cholesterol-lowering medication, you can stop immediately. There will be a side effect. Your memory will return. That's the only side effect. 1,700 cases of Alzheimer's are being diagnosed every week in Australia. Okay, so cholesterol-lowering medication, fat-free diet, margarine, surely that's reduced heart disease? No, because it's a false theory. In his research, Ansel Keys, he had to eliminate the Maasai. They live on blood, milk and meat, zero heart disease. He had to put them out of the equation. They don't prove his theory. Is that true science? Mind you, they don't live long because their poor gut can't handle no fibre, but they don't have heart disease. We've been spun a lie. I'm sorry to break the news to you. Well, they've tried something else. This is another great deception. When I was in America 2 years ago running a health retreat in Alabama, we had a nutritionist do our program. She was 69. She was in very good nick for her age, still working. She said, I have the advantage of being trained in university 40 years ago. She said, 40 years ago, we were taught that a cholesterol level under 300 was perfectly safe. Now, on Australian standards, that would be about 7.5. Did you hear that? Perfectly safe. She said they've dropped the levels. In America, it's now 200. Anyone over 200 is put on cholesterol-lowering medication. What would that be in Australia? Is that 5.5? Is that true? Anyone over 5.5 in Australia is put on cholesterol-lowering medication? Okay, so cholesterol-lowering medication, fat-free diet, they've lowered the levels. Surely that has reduced heart disease, has it? Not at all. Not at all. It's still the number one killer. Yet Alzheimer's come up, mental illness has come up because your brain cannot function without cholesterol. So they set up the Framingham Heart Study to prove that high cholesterol causes heart disease. I like this study because it wasn't set up by the pharmaceutical companies or the dairy industries or the meat industries or the grain and cereal industries. It's an independent study, little town, 30,000 people, been done over 30 years. Some die, more put on, and it's not proving that high cholesterol causes heart disease. They're finding that people with low and medium cholesterol levels are still having heart attacks. Notice that that doesn't reach the newspaper because the pharmaceutical companies are making a lot of money out of people on cholesterol-lowering medication. Because if you put on cholesterol-lowering medication, how long are you told you're on it for? Life. But do you know what this study is showing? People with high cholesterol levels don't get Alzheimer's. Would you like me to give you a moment's silence for that? Because what does your brain need? Cholesterol. Can't function without it. Sorry, we've been spun a lie. So you can see how important the liver is. It makes cholesterol according to the demands, and our body needs it. Dr. Malcolm Kendrick said for the first time, normal levels of a normal vital body substance is being called a disease. But what I'd like to look at now is what happens with everything that comes out of your body. And I'd like to show you what happens at Misty Mountain Health Retreat when our guests fast for 2 days. You see, when you fast for 2 days, we serve fresh fruit and vegetable juices every 2 hours. When you fast for 2 days, digestion stops. And we're not giving enough fuel to run on, and so your body starts to break down fat stores. And something else a little bit more sinister is being released. It's your fat-soluble toxins that have been stored in our fat cells over many a year. And your body cannot release fat-soluble toxins in a fat-soluble state. They have to be broken down to a water-soluble state. Then they can be released. So let me show you how this happens. This is the symbol of the fat-soluble toxin. Phase 1. So our guests on Monday, when they're fasting, their liver goes into phase 1 of the breakdown. In phase 1, the liver takes this fat-soluble toxin and it breaks it down to a metabolite. A metabolite simply means first stage of metabolism. This metabolite is a lot more complicated than it originally was. It's actually highly volatile. This metabolite creates a lot of free radicals. And free radicals damage the tissues. This metabolite can sometimes be 100 times more toxic than it originally was, especially in the breakdown of alcohol. You might say, well, what's the liver done? It's just created something worse than it originally was. It's a process. It's like when I clean out my kitchen cupboards. My kitchen looks 100 times messier than when I started. It's a process. But your liver has certain needs at this phase. It needs antioxidants. Antioxidants are given a nickname, free radical scavengers. So what are your most potent antioxidants? Beta-carotene, that's found in your orange and your green-coloured vegetables. And vitamin C, ascorbic acid with bioflavonoids, and vitamin E, a fat-soluble vitamin. We have to be eating fat to get our fat-soluble vitamins. Now, within 36 hours of beginning a detox, a fast, phase 2 kicks in. In phase 2, the liver takes this highly volatile metabolite and it joins it together with amino acids. The union of the amino acids and the toxic metabolite creates the water-soluble state. And remember, as a water-soluble state, it can be easily released out of the body. And its symbol is a wave in a box. Phase 3 happens in conjunction with phase 2. In phase 3, your liver takes this water-soluble state and releases it out via your urine, releases it out via your sweat glands, releases it out via your colon. And that's why at Misty Mountain Health Retreat, every afternoon our guests go in a steam sauna and have a good sweat. Important part of the detox. So what I have shown you here has only been known since 2002. And what I have shown you explains why you are better to do 2 days juices a week or 2 days a fortnight rather than one long fast. Because if you do, say, a 10-day fast, your liver is going to be releasing too many fat-soluble toxins, creating too many metabolites, and you can get quite sick. So at Misty Mountain Health Retreat, we supply the antioxidants by supplying fresh vegetable and fruit juices every 2 hours. There's all your antioxidants. Every second juice, we serve a protein powder, and this protein drink contains protein made out of pea. It's got a little bit of coconut cream and almond milk in it. It's quite delicious. Phase 3 requires fat. So every protein drink, we put a bit of coconut cream in there to provide the saturated fat to keep those cells supple to be able to do the process. I was giving this lecture 1 year in America, and a man said, "This is fascinating, the 3-phase of the liver detox." But he said, "This is not for your lay people, this is for your academics." I said, "Lay people have livers too, you know." This explains why we need more protein than any generation that lived on the planet. We're dealing with more environmental poisons than any generation. I thank God that He's given us a liver that has the ability to detoxify us from environmental poisons. And in Psalm 104 verse 14, the Bible says, God gave herbs for the service of man. There are herbs that will specifically heal and cleanse the liver, and that is St. Mary's thistle and dandelion and a sweet bitter is ginger. In my book Self-Heal by Design, I have devoted a whole chapter on the 3-phase of the liver detox. But also in that chapter, I give a list of the herbs that are specific to help heal the liver. Remember, the liver's a recoverable organ, and it will recover if you give it the right conditions. What's also contained in my book is a liver detox that goes over 5 days. Because remember, cancer cannot get a hold on the liver that's working well, and the liver is a recoverable organ. So let's look after our livers. Now, we do have time for a few questions if there are any.